Hey everyone, Andrew here. I've worked in the past on a few projects that use Amazon's S3 service to store images and files from Laravel applications. Even though the functionality is pretty much built into the framework, getting everything set up can be a bit jarring, especially to somebody who doesn't have a whole lot of experience with the AWS suite. The benefits can be pretty huge, however, so I threw together this video to show you how to get started with Amazon S3 on your own Laravel app. Let's get started. So right now I have a blank Laravel app right out of the box and up on my local dev environment. To showcase the storage functionality, I'm going to build a super bare bones image uploader. If you'd like to skip ahead to the part where I actually start implementing S3, check out the time link in the description below. We're going to need 3 routes, 2 gets, and a post. They'll all be using the same controller, image controller, and will be for showing the form, processing the form request, and displaying an image from a given model. Speaking of which, let's create that model first. And we can instead actually create it with the migration flag attached to our artisan call. This will generate our migration file and model class at the same time. Let's open up our newly created image model, and all we're going to add in here is an empty array for the guarded property. We want to be able to autofill anything into our model down the line. Next, we need to add some columns to our migration. For this demo, a file name string and a URL string should be perfect. If we look back at our routes file, we're going to need 3 different methods for our image controller. Let's open that class up and add in a method called create, a method called store with a request parameter, and a method called show with an image model parameter. For the create method, we're just going to return a simple view called create under the resources, views, images directory. This next part is just going to be some scaffolding of this basic upload view using Tailwind CSS and a super basic layout. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now, let's see how to use this file uploader. As with everything else, Laravel makes this insanely easy to grab the file that we chose and store it locally. In our store method, we can call request, file, image, which is the name of the file input in our view, and then store images. Images being the directory under the storage app directory that we want this file to be placed. That returns a relative path to the file from our app root, and we're just going to return that back to the browser for now. Okay, let's go back to our form, select an image, and upload it. Just as anticipated, we get back a file path. It also includes a randomly generated name since we didn't include one in the store method we used earlier. We can go into our application's storage directory, and under app, images, we can see our uploaded image. That works locally, great. But what we really want is to upload an image to an Amazon S3 bucket. Getting that functionality into our app is incredibly simple, and it starts off with a simple addition to our request store method, a comma, followed by the value S3. This tells the app that we want to use the S3 storage service, included already in Laravel. The only thing that's missing to get this fully tied in is a few config variables from AWS and the S3 bucket that we use. So let's grab them. Head on over to aws.amazon.com and create an account, or sign into your existing one. From there, we're going to navigate to Services, and then find S3. Click Create Bucket to start the process of making a new bucket, and follow the steps provided. The name you choose has to be unused throughout all of the S3 service, so try to think of something related to your app or your website name. The best region for you should be selected by default, but if for any reason you want to change it, for example, if you're developing your app in the United States, but it's very popular with European visitors, this would be the place to do it. I'm going to keep my region as default and move on. Everything on the remaining screens, I'm just going to keep the defaults for. Alright, our bucket is created. Now, we need to generate credentials for our application to access that bucket via the AWS API. This part is straightforward, although it can be somewhat complicated to newcomers. Go back to the Services section and search for IAM. This stands for Identity and Access Management, and it's where we're going to generate an API token and secret for our S3 bucket. On the left sidebar, select Users and then click Add User. Let's give them a username, and we want to select Programmatic Access, which enables a key and ID for the AWS API. This permissions section can be a bit confusing, and if you're not managing multiple users or groups, the easiest method is to use the Attach Existing Policies Directly section. Select that option and then search S3, putting a checkmark on Amazon S3 Full Access. Click through the next 2 pages and our user has been successfully created. Copy the access key ID and the secret access key into the appropriate areas of our Laravel application's AWS values in the env file. We talked about regions earlier, and each region has a specific key attached to it that you'll need to specify here. You can easily find your bucket's key by going to the AWS Service Endpoints page, scrolling down, and selecting the code that applies to the region name that your bucket is attached to. Ours is US East 1, because our bucket is in the North Virginia region. Finally, copy the name of your bucket into the AWS_bucket variable and save our env file. The final piece that we need to put in place is to use Composer and install the AWS S3 adapter that Laravel uses for the S3 file uploads. From our application root, use Composer, require, league, fly system, AWS S3 v3. After that's finished installing, we should be good to go. Let's head back to our application and test it out. I select my image from the computer, hit upload, and get back a file path. No errors, that's a good start. Instead of before where it was uploading it to our local machine, we can go back to our bucket, hit refresh, and see that an images directory has been created. If we go into it, we see our image that we just uploaded from our application. Everything is tied together, and it took us barely any time at all. Additionally, if we try to access this image directly, we get an access denied code. This is on by default on all new Amazon S3 buckets to prevent public access. Let's say that we want to store these paths to each image uploaded and utilize that database table and model that we created earlier. I'm going to run the migration locally to get these tables set up. Of course, I forgot to add in the appropriate database credentials, so I'll just fix that real quick and get us back on track. Okay, we have our images table. In our image controller's store method, let's add a new line creating a new image model. For the file name, we'll use the base name of the path returned back to us. And for the URL, we can use the storage facade's URL helper. We select the disk in question, pass through the path generated, and it returns the full URL back to the Amazon S3 object. Lastly, instead of returning the path from the storage driver, we're going to return the full image model object. Going back to our application and uploading another file, we get back the image object with the ID, file name, and full URL to the Amazon S3 object. We can go back to our S3 bucket and verify that the file is appearing there, just as expected. And clicking on that link results in an access denied message, which is again what is expected. If our users can't access these images directly through Amazon's URLs, how can we return them back to them? Well, Laravel makes this super easy with the storage facade. Opening up our image controller again, let's add a single line to the show method. We'll return storage disk, selecting S3, and then chain on the response method with a parameter of the original image path used in the store method, images, and then the file name of the image. If we go back to our app and visit the route, using the ID of the image model, Laravel retrieves the image from our S3 bucket and generates the appropriate response to display that image right in our browser. That works great, but sometimes we do want our users to be able to access files straight from the Amazon S3 URLs. This way, any resources are offloaded from our server and instead are handled directly by AWS. Since these are by default set to private, we'll have to make some slight adjustments to our code and to our S3 bucket. Starting in the store method of our image controller, add a new line under the request file store call. Using the storage facade, we're going to select our S3 disk and call a method called setVisibility with a value of public. This essentially changes the access details for the recently uploaded file to be set to public, disregarding its previous state. In order to make this functionality viable, though, we have to go back to our S3 bucket and click on the Permissions tab. Scrolling down to the section that says Block All Public Access, click the Edit button to the right and deselect Block All Public Access. Save your changes and confirm them. Now, if we go back to our application, upload an image, and click on the returned URL, we see our image coming from our S3 bucket's URL. You might be wondering if this means that now all of your files in that bucket are visible with the URLs, and that's not the case. Our files that we previously uploaded without the setVisibility public trait are still under private access, and if we remove that call and re-upload a file again, we can't access that file with the returned URL. Well, what if you do want all of your files public by default? If we open up our application's config file system file, we can do just that. Scroll down to the S3 service key under file system disks, and we're going to add a new key value pair to this array, visibility public. If we save this and return back to our application, uploading yet another picture, the S3 bucket URL is open to the public without us having to specify that using the setVisibility trait. Of course, you can do the opposite as well. Let's add back that setVisibility call and change public to private. Going back to our app and uploading one more image, the Amazon S3 bucket URL isn't open and returns an access denied error just as we'd intended. Well, that's about it. You've learned how to successfully implement Amazon's S3 storage into a Laravel app, configure a bucket and user for use, and set the visibility of your uploaded files to public or private. As always, thanks so much to my Patreon supporters and to everybody else giving me support for these videos. If you have any questions about this video or any other web development topics, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or in the comments below. Thanks for watching.